Okay, so I have a couple questions that I'm just going to pass this microphone back and forth. So the person that was the person that ended up connecting researchers in schools, his name was Don Kramer, and he did this job for a long, long time. And I was talking to him, and he said there were some red flags, that all the districts that he worked with said, you know, they would look at these proposals and would say, there is no way in this world we can do that. So some of the red flags that he said, political issues, utilization of class instructional time, which Mike already said, sensitive issues that may be unique to the district, after-school activities, which require school personnel supervision, requiring additional work for the school district, and even offering cash incentives to school personnel, parents, and students for participation in research projects. And I know that I've had IRBs approved that have those kind of incentives in them, but this is some of the things that Don found out that districts just did not really appreciate. They were red flags. So I want to run this back to Mike and Peter specifically and see what, or maybe some other red flags, and I know you did mention a few, but just anything else that really is something that researchers have to keep track of and make sure that they don't perhaps include. Something that you know will not work in your districts.
Yeah, so Don has a pretty good outlook on this because he did do this for a long time. I just want to run down that list you gave me and make a couple of comments. Political issues, I mean, we all know they exist. I try not to say no to those, and I will try to be sensitive in who I have review those. We do recognize in Columbus that we have a wide variety of students, and we have people across the district who are advocates for all of our populations. And I will do my best to connect you with those people who will be sensitive to that. Having said that, you read the paper every day. It is a political process in running the public education system, so we do have to be aware of that. But I will do my best to connect you with the people who will most likely be sensitive to what it is you're trying to research. Utilization of class instructional time, that's pretty much a non-starter. I mean, that's one we're going to hold fast to. You really want to be aware of when testing is going on. You don't want to walk into a building while they're doing statewide testing and expect to get a principal's attention and talk about a research project. That is the quickest way to get a no that you will ever find, is to walk in on the first day of OGTs into a high school and try and find the principal and have some conversation about some research project you want to do next year. So just kind of try and be sensitive to that school calendar and take a look at what's going on across the district. You will find principals much more amiable after statewide testing. Beginning of the school year is very stressful. You kind of get a lull after that, and then we get into testing in the spring. So just kind of be aware of the way the school year kind of ebbs and flows. Sensitive issues that may be unique to the district. I mean, we typically ask for our research purposes that you identify us as a large Midwestern urban school district. So we really don't fight too much about issues specific to the district. If you want to start doing a research project on state auditors' investigations of attendance data, we're probably going to say no to that right now. But outside of that kind of a major issue, that's not something really we're going to be too terribly concerned about. After school activities which require school supervision, again, this is a resource issue. We've got to pay somebody to be there to keep the building open. That's something you probably want to try and find some resources to pay for that. Some kind of funding from, whoever it is that you're looking for funding from. Additional work for the school district, a little bit's okay. We'll pass out papers, we'll collect papers, we'll do some minimal stuff to help move things along if the principal agrees to it. But this is where the union review is going to get involved. And they're going to take a look at what your expectations of the teaching staff are, and that's where they're going to come back and have an issue with. So you want to try and keep that as much to a minimum as possible. Obviously, there's some interaction and some back and forth that's going to have to go on. The cash incentives, there are two issues here. Cash incentives for staff that's a no-starter. Our legal office has determined that that is not something we are going to do in the Columbus City Schools. So there are no incentives to be provided to staff as part of the research project.
So cash could be a gift card, it could be, how do you define?
Incentives of any kind.
Okay.
That are personal in nature. If the incentive is instructional materials that come along with the program, that's an entirely different story. But in terms of, a Starbucks gift card or a Visa card or anything of that nature, personal equipment for the teacher to take home, our legal office has determined there are some gray areas there that they don't want to deal with. And rather than sort out each one individually, our policy as a district is just no. Incentives for participants, for our parents and students, is not a problem, as long as it doesn't provide an undue influence. And as is our privilege, we may have a slightly lower standard for that dollar value than the IRB might. And we're going to look at that in terms of what we know about the school populations and what we would consider might be an undue influence. So it might pass the IRB threshold, but from our viewpoint, with a little better knowledge of who the actual people in the schools are, we still might raise some concern with that. And typically what we would do is you come back and say, look, let's talk about making this a little bit lower in value. We wouldn't just strictly turn that down as a research proposal. There'd be some back and forth to try and negotiate that issue. So in terms of the red flags, I mean, that's pretty much most of them. And I would say the big one is don't go into a school during testing. Just stay as far away from the buildings as you can if you don't want your project to die a horrible and quick death.
Well, I don't have a lot more to add there. Specifically, Mike's really much more experienced working with a multitude of schools. Like I mentioned before, at Metro's end and maybe at a building end, this might be, at a district end, Mike gave a great perspective, but maybe at a building end, this is still helpful even in a bigger district. Like I said before, it's kind of benefits, costs, and value parallelism. Is it parallel to our values as a school building? That'll tend to make us want to do it more, and then are the benefits to the school greater, and maybe even the greater good benefits past Metro too, because we're a small school with a big footprint. We like doing that. So just benefits and costs, and then if it's parallel with our values, that's a big plus. So that's kind of how we look at it at a school level.
Great. So I have a question for Joni. Okay, this has to do with IRB. So here we have, somebody has decided that they want to work with schools. They have to talk to those schools and get some sort of an indication that those schools would be interested, and then they have to submit those letters as part of the IRB. Is this correct?
Yeah, actually what Kim's referring to is called a letter of support. So basically, with an IRB application, there's a section where you talk about your site, where the research is going to be done. And if you're going into a school, the IRB is going to want to see a letter of support, which basically says that the principal or whoever's in charge is aware of the research, has approved the research, and that it's okay. So it's kind of like, no surprises. I mean, the administrators have to know what's going on in their buildings, and so that's why we require the letter of support.
But this is truly confusing as all get out. Because, and I'm going to talk about what the policy is that's coming out of the college's Office of Research. But here you have.
So the problem is you are asking for people to go to principals and say, yes, I'm interested in having this research done, like in my building. But what happens is that's not the letter from the district, for instance. And so what happens is you have to talk to schools and they say, oh, that sounds really interesting. I would be interested in that. But that is not, in terms of Columbus Public, for instance, that really does not give you entree into that district. And so when I said earlier that you would love this to be a linear process, it's really not. And so would you I don't know who would like to talk about that. Now, talking to Peter before you ever submit the IRB, that would, I mean, because Peter gets to make the decision. Or maybe at Wellington, you've got the principal of Wellington. But when you have this district, so somebody wants to come in, they talk to two principals, let's say 2 of your high school principals say, yes, I would like for this research to happen in my school. Talking to Mike here. That does not mean that the district has approved that research to be done. Okay, I just want to be clear here because I am not. So Mike, would you?
Yeah, and we would really prefer that you come to our office before you go talking to any schools. And that's just, at a district level, our attempt to protect our principals' time. It's not because we don't trust our principals. It has nothing to do with the fact other than we just want to protect their time, not have them addressing projects with you that are then going to end up not going anywhere. And as long as there's nothing really unusual about the project, our office will have no problem giving you a letter of support, saying we reviewed it and we're perfectly willing to let you come and conduct research in our district. The IRB then has to understand that what that is a license to hunt. That's still not permission from an individual school.
Right.
Because our principals are given, it's their building. You know, and we approve things and we try and pre-screen them for their benefit. But the principals are kings and queens of their own buildings, and they get the final say, except in very, very rare occurrences, on what goes on in their school buildings. And usually in things where they don't really have a say, they're not really research activities, they're evaluation activities of things that are already going on in the building. I think you had something you wanted to add.
I just want to reiterate what you just said.
In our district, and I think this is true for a lot of the larger districts, the city districts, you don't get to the principal without getting through me first. And if you do go through the principal, they will send you to me. Okay, because no research activity takes place in Springfield City without going through my office, and we have a coordinator of research and assessment, and we have a protocol that you have to follow. And if you don't have all of that in place, you won't gain access to our principals or anyone else. So I just wanted to reiterate what you said. I would start with the superintendent, or if there's a director of research in the school district, start at central office. Some of the smaller local schools, the real small ones, they may not have that kind of formal structure, but you can bet the larger city districts will.
That's right. Thanks, David.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
If I could just add one other thing to that, just to clarify. I mean, I'm really glad this distinction came out, because what they're saying though, but I think it's important to realize, whatever's happening at these district levels, you're gonna need to find that out. I mean, you're gonna need to talk to your peers, to your advisors, and find out. Yeah, and find out how that's different. But I want to make the point that what we're looking for, the IRB, we're looking for that letter of support where the physical research is going to take place. That's what we're looking at. That's not intended to be a district approval. That's your responsibility to figure that out. We're not going to figure out where you need to go for your district approval. That's up to you. But we want to know as far as the actual building where the subjects are going to be.
So I think this might be a good time to open it up. I see lots and lots of questions, but this IRB schools intersection is huge. So Lindsay, go ahead.
Well, that's the point I wanted to raise, that when I talk with students a lot, they get really confused about what do I do first. And I think that if nothing else, the really important message here is that it's not going to be a linear process. It's not going to be you go this place first, you get your approval, then you go that place and get your approval. But you're probably going to go round and round a little bit. And it may mean starting with the district, then getting permission to go to some principals, then coming back to the IRB. But Mike, you mentioned you look for an IRB approval when you're looking at proposals. So people go, well, maybe I'm supposed to go to IRB first. So I think that's where a lot of people feel very challenged, is like, everything is supposed to be done before everything else, and how do I start?
Right, and that's impossible.
Right. So where should people start?
So they should probably start with us. And it's always nice when one shows up with the IRB approval done, because the consent forms are done, they're all nicely numbered, they're all prepared, somebody else has signed off on them. However,
There's a big however here.
we'll look at proposals that have not been to IRB, certainly, and give you that letter of support. I mean, we've got a pretty good idea of what the IRB is looking for, having seen enough of the approvals come back. But we're not the IRB. That's not to say that just because we give you approval that all of your consent forms are going to meet all the requirements of the IRB, or any other aspect of your proposal is going to meet the requirements of the IRB.
I'm going to intersperse something here. So Mike and I have been working over the last 3 or 4 months, and there have been proposals that have been approved by IRB, but both Peter and Mike, you have said, wait a minute, there's problems here. And so
Right, and
you have,
we may be a little more stringent on some things than the IRB too, so.
which means they have to be amended and they go back to IRB, you know, so it's,
So allow a little time.
yeah.
And we're gonna be totally supportive of what the district wants. I mean, those are their students, and however, you know, they get to drive that process. We're doing it from the regulatory perspective, remember again, because you're doing this under that umbrella of Ohio State, okay? So that's what we're concerned about, but, I mean, you also can't come to our office and say, well, Columbus already approved it. I don't need approval here. Wrong. Just as if, again, it goes back and forth. But on the flip side of that, if we give approval and they say to you, we want this done from the district level, we're gonna back that 100%. So again, it's like Dr. Enderman said, it is a back and forth process. Can it be frustrating? Yes. But, I mean, this is kind of the nature of research in schools. It's gonna be that way. It can be done. Everybody is trying to help you facilitate it, even though it's not always gonna feel that way, we really are. But we just have to help you from different regulatory levels. And we have to respect what the schools need to do, and it's really kind of a back and forth. But each type of research, you know, if you were doing cancer research in the medical center, believe me, they've got some issues too. So, I mean, everybody's got hoops to jump through.
So we had a,
In terms of red flags, just one more I wanted to mention that has come up this year, probably more than I've seen before. If you are asking for free and reduced price lunch data, you need to specifically list that in your consent letter and ask for parental consent for that specific information. That is not part of a student's academic record, and that data is not covered under FERPA, and therefore not covered under all the FERPA exceptions. For the legal scholars out there, it's actually covered under the National School Lunch Act, which is a lot more stringent and has many fewer exceptions to it than FERPA. So just in terms of something that's come up as a recent red flag that we've had to send people back and forth to change forms over, you want free reduced price lunch status, you must list that specifically and get signed parental permission to have it, separate from any other data that you want about the students. So just as something to try and keep people out of a little bit of trouble.
Well, we had a question here. Why don't you go ahead?
So, if you're working with high-risk populations, so our department special ed, so that's obviously going to be more inclined to go to full board review. I feel like if we start at the district level with a proposal, we could be wasting your time if the at-risk population isn't, what we're thinking of doing hasn't been approved by the IRB. So if we come to you and say, hey, this is what we want to do, and then we go to IRB and they're like, actually, no, you're not going to do it that way. So should we start with you and do an informal meeting and then go to the district with a preliminary proposal, especially for those of us who are early in our research careers?
And let me just make one comment. You know, you're working with two governmental agencies, and whenever you work with two governmental agencies, there really is never a good place to start first, you know. You just have to start, exactly. And because it's not like their regulations are intertwined, and that's just now from my experience, and it has nothing to do with the specifics, but just from a very general perspective, I would say just get started, get the lay of the land at this place, get the lay of the land, and then start working your way through the process.
And I don't ever mind reading proposals, but probably your best bet in that situation is to start both places. What were those office hours again? I think would be the best place to go is to start with informal conversations on both ends before you get into that full-blown proposal writing and asking for actual approvals. So you've kind of got some of those answers ahead of time. And I will never refuse to read a proposal just because you haven't been to the IRB office yet.
I was just going to say that one of the things that I learned in Dr. Conrad's class and Dr. Hoy's class too is that, you know, as soon as you take something formal, it gets a little trickier. And so whatever work you can do in the informal routes, like Dr. Conrad was saying relationally, just, you know, drop in at the school for a 10-minute meeting. Or send an email saying, could I drop in for a 10-minute meeting? Pitch your concept for a few minutes, field questions for a few minutes, and stick the thermometer in the water, so to speak. Says, seems like a pretty warm response. And then you can go take a few pieces of feedback and go to office hours, or vice versa, office hours, and then take, you know what I mean? I think that's just great advice. So that way you're not so vested in having formalized something. I'm not going to like your proposal anymore if you give me a 10-page packet. It's that conversation that's going to cause me to either catch your spark or say, nah, not as much here, seems like a good project, good luck to you, you know? So you don't have to, at least for Metro, you don't have to go through all that work on the front end for that informal conversation. So that'd be an easier way to get started.
I think that's really good advice. I mean, you could have a discussion with someone in the district. You could come and talk to me, just to let you know, when, like, as far as disapproving research, I've been in my position 5 years, and I'm also a member of the SBS board, and in 5 years, I've seen one study outright disapproved. Get it out of here, we don't ever want to look at it again. So the chances of that happening are very low. The IRB is not looking at, say, your research design, your topic, that type of thing. The only time we're looking at that is if we feel it's causing undue harm to human subjects. So we're not going to be looking at that part of it. That's more like the district and what they were talking about with value. All right, but I think this idea of having numerous conversations is important. And as was mentioned, you know, these are regulations. Regulations are interpreted. They're not black and white. That's why, you know, there could be a faculty here right now from Michigan thinking, I never had to do this at Michigan. Well, they interpreted their regulations differently. This is how we interpret them here. So it's great. It definitely is.
Yes.
Is that me?
Yes, please.
I have a question that might span a couple areas. About the teacher compensation, I've worked for the last 3 years with a larger project that does ask a little bit from the teachers, and it sounds like there's been some change in like the money or monetary or gift card compensation, and I hear that. On the other hand, with IRB, I'm wondering what compensation can we give teachers, which I think they want even more, which is access to their own data, because we have to say that, you know, we make it anonymous. You know, we take the student data and take the name off. Are we allowed to give teachers access to the group data as long as the student name isn't on it? And then another question is, probably for Mike, could we provide funding, help provide funding for teachers who are coming to present with us at a conference, per se, if they've been working with us? And I mean, this is a question that's for larger projects. You know, most individual researchers can't do something like that. But, you know, these teachers give us so much when they have not much left to give. You know, they're squeezed. So what can we give them in terms of access to the data and then anything else?
To answer your second question first, I think that would be professional development. I would consider that, and I think that's teacher development, not personal income for the teacher. I don't think that would be a problem. And as to the other question, I'll pass the microphone in a second, but to start with, I would say anything that you would feel comfortable sending to publication, you could certainly give back to the teacher. So beyond that, I'll let.
It's an identifiable thing.
Yeah, and, okay, just to kind of start though in general with the incentive, you know, there is not anything clear cut as far as what you can do. But the board's gonna look at it as, could that be viewed coercive? As far as the incentive, the amount, so simple example, you know, can you offer a college student $1,000 to do a survey? What do you think? Okay, no. I'd sign up to do it for less than that, all right? So no, you can't do that. Can you offer them a $10 gift card to Starbucks? Sure, reasonable. So, I don't know, and when you said big project, what does big project mean? I don't know what big project means.
IES sponsored.
How much time? You know, and I don't think I can answer it directly, and again, that's why we have a board that would sit around and discuss that. Could another teacher think that that's coercive, to be offering them, you know, money to go to a conference?
Hawaii.
Yeah, could they overly try to get their students involved because they want to go to this conference so badly? I think it's a little ouchy, personally. But again, I'm only one person. I think that is a situation where a group of people sitting around at a full board meeting need to decide what they think. So I don't have a straight answer for you on
And
that.
can we show teachers a compilation of their students' data that's been de-identified?
Okay, now, again, I've heard you say, okay, you've said that two different ways now. You said, can we give them the data? Now you said, can we show them the data? I think, again, the question there is gonna be, what are they going to do with it? Are they gonna take the data and do additional research on it? Then I think we're getting a little ouchy. But again, I don't have a clear-cut answer for you on that either. I think it would depend on what are they gonna do with it? What is it on? What's the topic? Is it de-identified? What was said in the consent form? Did you tell them that you were gonna pass it along, even in aggregate? Those are the types of questions that would have to be answered.
And I could come ask you, or,
Yeah, and honestly, to say that, I really would say that that's gonna be a board decision.
So that should have been in the IRB.
Yes, so that would need to be like in the application, this is what we want to do, we're gonna give the data to the teachers.
right, and I think we're in the interpret level, so that answered my question.
Yeah,
And just to show you how gray this can get.
yeah.
So let's take a situation where we've got an ongoing project with an outside organization and Ohio State and the school district, and they want to give the Gates McGinnity to some students. And for,
Which is what?
it's a reading test.
Okay.
And for practical purposes, because this is the way the vendor works, they give the school district the money, and the school district actually purchases the test and gives it, and gets the data back and turns the data back over. So, I mean, really, this is gonna have to be on a case-by-case basis, how all that works. Again, in terms of the professional development that go into conferences, I would expect those teachers are doing some significant amount of work for that kind of an incentive.
Yeah.
And that would all be spelled out in the grant budget, and would have been approved far ahead of any of those decisions actually being made, so.
Yeah.
For the kind of grant you're talking about, we're talking about a lot of money, and we're talking about some pretty stringent federal regulations in terms of tracking that
Right,
money.
and it sounded like there was a change within Columbus recently.
So we've had people want to come in and give teachers $20 gift cards to help process, help give kids surveys and stuff. When we talk about teacher incentives, let's just be clear. That's what I was talking about. What you're talking about is taking a teacher to a conference who's had some substantial participation in the research project. And that's a whole different can of worms.
Yeah.
Well, it seems to me this discussion is about this general idea of what can we give back to teachers, schools, and districts. And several of you sort of made mention about, does it fit our values, does it meet our need? You know, we're more likely to want to be participating in something where we perceive some value to it, which I think makes total sense to all of us here. But perhaps people on the panel would speak to what kinds of things can we give you? Because I think when, and you know, it's a while since I was in graduate school, but when I took research methods classes, nobody ever talked about that. They talked about design, they talked about how you write it up, they talked about how you collect your data and analyze it, and then you publish. And there was never any talk about, do you give something to the teachers, do you give something to, like, that this is a two-way street. So what kinds of things would you like to get from us that would make you more likely to say, yes, I would like to partner with you?
Well, I wanted to jump in with the last question, just to say thanks for your intention. I don't know your name.
Amy.
Amy. Thanks for your intention in that. That's exactly what we want. So I'd say try it. But I don't know how it's going to work with IRB, and you guys got to work out that. But from the school districts end, I love the idea of getting data. We had a research group do, I think, a real lovely job. A few years ago, they gathered a lot of data through interviews, mostly perceptual type data, and they presented that at a staff meeting, 20 minutes in a PowerPoint format, disaggregated, in aggregate, and so that was a value add. They didn't give us the whole data set from us. They didn't mix it with all the other schools. Yes, they used that data and then did a much bigger project, but they took the time, 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever it took them, to kind of say what of this would be really helpful for Metro to hear. And they pulled that out, Metro specific, gave us a 20-minute presentation. We don't need an hour and a half. And we also don't need a 50-page paper with p-values. But just kind of some of that data that's I get data just watching my students in that formative assessment, but I don't get that sort of data of 30-minute conversations with lots of different students and lots of different teachers and all that sort of thing. So for them to take the time to put together that little 20-minute presentation, that tells us some things. And so that was just lovely. Something like that is just really great, because at the back end, if you did that for someone else, let's say you went in and looked at someone's house because you said, I'd really like to learn how you do what you do here in your decorations. It'd just be nice if you were taking photos the whole time you were there for your own magazine or something, if you came back and gave them some of the photos or showed them to it at least. It's this sense of like, we're here, we are looking at it, here's what we saw. I think that's just real nice wherever it's possible logistically.
I think that's really good advice, and that's something we try to do and have not been as diligent in the past about as we should, is to collect some of the work product back and see what we can get out of it at the end. That's always a requirement that's listed on all of our paperwork, and sometimes people send it to us and sometimes they don't. And just as a matter of resources, we've not really done a lot of follow-up in collecting it if they don't send it to us. But if you do have the time to just have a conversation with the principal, meet with the senior leadership team or at a staff meeting, that would be fantastic. I don't think our principals and our teachers are looking to get, monetary, physical rewards out of this necessarily. Again, being at Ohio State, the school district's getting some benefit from being there in terms of fee waivers. And those then get distributed to teachers through various machinations in the district that we won't go into. But other than that, people are not looking for gift cards. They're not looking to be paid for their work in addition to what they're being paid by the school district. I have not seen it be an issue. If you're really worried about trying to find some incentive that you think is going to entice buildings and teachers to do this, I would say you're probably barking up the wrong tree, unless your research is around, let's say your research is around smart board use. And so you're going to buy smart boards and use them as part of the research. That might be an incentive, and that might be something the IRB might consider coercive. So again, that's probably a place to start, both places, with informal conversations about that, so you don't make all these big plans and then have one or the other parties tell you no. But to Dr. Anderman's point, I think we're all still more worried about the research and what we can get out of it to help our kids than we are the toys and the money that are possible. Really, My brother's in IT, and I work in the IT office for the district, and he asked me last night for the 20th time in 2 years, why I'm not in the private sector. Well, because that's not where I want to be, because that's not what I'm looking for in terms of rewards. And that's most of our people. So I would be less concerned about trying to find those incentives. You know, if there's something that's going on as part of the project that could be left at the school that has some value to them, that's great. But don't go out of your way to find that as part of a project.
So Jack, we'll do one more comment from you, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. But we have, hopefully people will stay. I want to introduce a couple people, and then we'll wrap up and have a little mixer.
Great. Well, I was just going to address Lindley's comment as well. And I'll just give you a really good example. I remember when Joe Corona and Susan Sears were doing some research in Whitehall, and they were thinking of an incentive for the teachers, and so they agreed, and they put together this basket of like 30 books. So if if you're going to buy 20 teachers $20 gift certificates, they just did this basket of books, and you never saw a group of teachers who were more excited about participating in their research. So they're, just giving something to the school, and you mentioned the smart board, so just another idea.
Okay, well, the Office of Research has some paperwork that we would like for you to fill out to help us to facilitate the relationship from the, and build the partnerships between schools and the researcher. And so, I'm going to do this really quickly, believe me. So, if you look at the EHE homepage and you see the research tab, if you click on that, oh, I hate these computers.
Oh, I was going to say I was signed in a minute ago.
Okay, so let's go back,
Open up a new tab.
open up a new tab, and that is,
You can hit Control Plus.
oh my gosh sakes. Maybe it's here. Oh,
Yeah.
so
That'll-
sorry. That's right. I'm going to edit this part out. So we're working in the Office of Research to really put as much information on this page as possible. We're still working on that. But the one thing that we have done, you'll see the second entry on this left nav bar, it says past workshops. And so here is the information about today's panel. And I will go ahead and put email links and that kind of stuff, embed links into those contact information. I will, that's a perfect idea. But, so this first link is a form that talks about what we're asking from researchers to facilitate this process. And there's an information form, which is, I'll show you that in just a second, but the things that we want you to think about is that ensuring researchers have proper documentation as required by IRB, the university and college, individual school districts, and state of Ohio policies. We want, and this was interesting, Jack called them tentacles. We have no idea, and I'm saying we, College of Education, we have no idea where all the research is happening in our neighborhood schools, in schools halfway across, Ohio. We really don't know, and we're going to try to figure out where all of those are and to build on those relationships and the research that's happening. And then this thing that Mike has been talking about more than once, we have an exchange of services agreement with schools in Franklin County, not all schools, but the vast majority of schools. And if you're out there doing research, then those schools and districts have the opportunity to get fee waivers and actually come to the university. Their teachers can take classes for free. So, all those things are really, really important. We've got compliance going on, there's just a lot of things. And so what we're asking people to do is, I'm the contact person in terms of research in schools, in the Office of Research. And a couple things, we're asking, not the 20-page paper, but a prospectus, maybe 6-page, where you really talk about how much teacher time, student time, the protocols, the instruments, when you're going to be impinging on those classrooms. So we're asking for that. The research questions, exactly. The instruments. And so this is where this thing, so if you have already talked to a few principals and you know the school districts in which you want to go, or maybe it's the letter from Mike. Mike says, you know what, I've talked to this person, Columbus Public, we're welcoming this. So we need to know where you want to go and who you've already talked to. And then this background check. And we have to have anybody that's in a school have actually 2 background checks. And what the FBI, so the BCI and I does an Ohio check. Right. So, and then the FBI check actually checks out of state, okay? And there's just so many things that are happening in schools that are just not appropriate. And we want to make sure that none of the researchers from Ohio State, or gosh, anywhere, are actually doing things that are not appropriate. And this would, and having this background check as a requirement will help mitigate against that. These background checks are only good for 1 year. If you've had any kind of ping on your record, 6 months. And I'm not kidding, okay? You might not have been convicted, but if you show up on some police blotter, if you're in 6 months, okay? So usually it takes 2 weeks, but think about it. Don't do one now, and you're not going to collect data for 6 months. Wait a little bit closer to that time. It does cost $58. Yeah.
What's the procedure for that?
It's all in this document. It really is. I say, go here, talk to this person, and so on and so forth. So, but this, I think, I'm a little bit wordy, but I'm trying to make sense. If things don't make sense, please contact me, and I will, and this is the beginning of a conversation. I mean, it really is. There's always going to be exceptions to the rule and everything else, but this document here will help you get started. Now, before I take one more question, Kate, would you please stand up?
Sure. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, so this is Kate Harkin, and she is the P12, the director of the P12 initiative. Is it the initiative program? Initiative. And so Kate is somebody that you need to touch base with if you're going to be doing research, or if you've got ideas, you want to build partnerships. It's not so much the research in schools thing, but I just thought, I really wanted her to come by. I wanted you to know her name. The P12 initiative has sort of kind of not been very active in the last couple of years, but now Kate is the new director and will be really supporting that partnership building. So I wanted you to know her. And she's going to stay around for a few minutes too and eat a brownie. And so you can go up and introduce yourself. Okay, so we had one more question, and then I think we're going to go eat a brownie. Okay.
Thanks. I saw a time frame was mentioned in here between 2 to 6 weeks for this internal process, but could we just talk about an average or expected time for the different types of IRB so we can start to think about time frame
Oh my gosh.
for the IRB?
I don't know that that's even possible.
Okay.
Seriously.
Knowing that it will depend on individual circumstance.
I totally just spaced out on the beginning of your question. I'm very sorry. Obviously, I need a brownie. No. So could you just repeat that? I am so
I
sorry.
was just looking at the time frame here, and it triggered for me wondering if you could discuss typical or average time frames for the types of IRB approval.
Yes, I can. Okay, so for exempt, now again, that's that least risky, determined by the person in our office, and we say 1 to 3 weeks. For expedited, we say 4 to 6. Okay, now of course we pad these because we want to look good, okay? And for full board, we actually say 8 to 12 weeks. And let me briefly explain why, okay? For social and behavioral sciences, the board meets once a month. You have to have your application in our office, and we have to screen it to make sure all the parts and pieces are there. There's a back and forth there with you. You forgot this, you forgot that. So we get it complete. Then it has to go on the agenda for the meeting, okay, which is once a month. 2 weeks before that meeting, your study has to be sent to the board members so they can start reviewing this huge packet of material for the meeting. So I've said 2 weeks, this, and we have to allow for anything else that might happen. So that's why with the full board, you really have to plan your time accordingly. Okay?
Thank you very much.
So one thing I forgot to say is there is a survey. We would love to get some feedback on our panelists, the facilities, and some of you might recognize that 321 exit slip. Some of you folks have probably used that in your classroom. So 3 things you learned, 2 things, what did I say? 2, I don't know what I said. Whatever. And then one question that you really still have. So, whatever you can give us, information would be very, very helpful. So please, you can just leave those on the credenza or, the desk, something, or you can hand them to me, that would be fine. So please don't forget to do the evaluation. We really appreciate this. Next week, we have, on Wednesday, I learned something new. There's actually 2 subject librarians assigned to our college. I never knew that. I've been here for 100 years. But those folks are going to be here to talk about subject-specific databases and tools and services of the OSU library system. Hopefully you can come to that. It's next Wednesday at 1. In April, it's April 10th, it's going to be private foundations. I think we know a lot about those federal funds, but this is private foundations. And in May, it's going to be, the focus is Qualtrics and using that survey instrument building system. So we've got lots of things coming up. Please go to our research part of the website, and we'll continue to update that and put lots of new information on that. All right, well, thank you very much.